morning, everyone. I'm Ivo Dalder, president of the Chicago Council on Global Affairs, and it's great to have all of you here, especially our members, for joining us via Zoom today for this on-the-record program on U.S.-Pakistan relations and South Asian peace and security. I'd like to thank the Consul General Javed Amrani and his wonderful staff at the Pakistani Consulate in Chicago for helping to make this program possible. Before we dive into our conversation, please note the Council is a nonprofit, independent, and nonpartisan organization. The views expressed by individuals we host are their own, and they do not represent the institutional positions or views of the Council. Now, if you'd like to join the conversation, please submit a question by going to ccga.live in your browser, and you can either send a question or vote on one. It's now my great pleasure to introduce today's speaker. Asad Majeed Khan is the ambassador of the Islamic Republic of Pakistan to the United States. During his diplomatic career spanning over 29 years, Ambassador Khan has held many positions, including as Pakistan's ambassador to Japan. He's worked in the Ministry of Foreign Affairs in many different capacities, including as Additional Foreign Secretary for the Americas, Director General for the Americas, Director General for West Asia, and Director General for the United Nations, among many other positions. Ambassador Khan, welcome. Thank you for joining us today. So wonderful to have you.
Thank you very much, Ambassador Dalder, for having me. And through you, I'd like to thank the Chicago Council on Global Affairs for organizing this conversation. And I'm looking forward to a comprehensive exchange on issues of interest to you, to us, and to your viewers. Thank you very much.
Terrific. Thank you so much for being here again. 2020 started out terrifically. Condé Nast Traveler named Pakistan at the top of its 20 best places to go in 2020 list. But as all of you know, travel these days is a little bit more difficult because of the shutdown that the COVID-19 pandemic has brought forth. In fact, I haven't been on an airplane since February, which is probably the longest time of not being on an airplane in a long time, and would have loved to have been put Pakistan high on the list. But before we get to the travel opportunities back there, let's talk a little bit about the situation about COVID-19, the pandemic, how it has affected Pakistan, and what steps your government is taking to combat the pandemic and the economic crisis that has resulted from it.
Yes, I think this pandemic is a crisis. It's a global crisis that we are all dealing with in our respective countries, you know, with our strengths, with our weaknesses, with the issues specific to our national jurisdictions. And I can tell you that I think if I were to go back to that first day when we had our first COVID infection on February 26th, and then the projections that were made of the situation in Pakistan, and particularly given the fragility of our, and I can confess, of our health system, we were frankly expecting much worse. And now, when I look at the numbers in Pakistan today, luckily, and touch wood, you know, our rate of infection is down. Our casualties are way down. We have flattened the curve. In fact, it's going down. And all of this has happened on a number of factors. But then again, I think it is all tentative because, as one would say, that the jury is still out. One, we still need to take all the precautions that we need to take. But for us, we were very quick to go in with the lockdown. So the borders were closed, you know, inter-provincial transportation was closed, schools were closed, universities were closed, offices were closed. So everything was closed. And then we also spent quite some time in trying to build our capacity, you know, in terms of importing personal protective equipment, in terms of replenishing or creating new supplies for ventilators and all of that, anticipating that we might face a major disaster. And then also at the same time spending some energy and effort on building indigenous capacity also. So we were successful, I must say, in creating that capacity. But we are very lucky, actually, to see that for a country of 220 million, the total infections are still around 280, 90,000. And the number of casualties or deaths are around 6,000 plus. So this number, when we compare it with others in our neighborhood, is still, I would say, small. And it's not just the health-related impact, and it was a team effort. I can also say that the entire system came together. The military was part of it, the provinces were part of it, all political parties were part of it, because there were different governments in different provinces in Pakistan. So it was also a very coordinated, coherent national effort. And so the medical part was one dimension of it. Then the economic part of it. And for a country as poor as Pakistan, this is still a challenge. And I think we are still to see the real impact of COVID because of the unemployment numbers, because of the drop in exports. And for us, frankly, it came at a worst possible time, because the tough economic reforms that government had taken had started to show results in terms of rising exports, in terms of the economic growth catching up. So it hit us bad at a time and then government had to put in about $8 billion, about 1.2 trillion rupees of stimulus package, to help provide that much needed relief to those daily wages who had lost their livelihood, and also to provide for those essential supplies and to provide subsidies to those who could not go out and buy. So all of that, in hindsight, I must say that we are in a better position. The economy has not contracted as badly as we thought it would, because it is 0.4%, which is still way less than the numbers that we are seeing in our neighborhood or also in some of the other poorer parts of the world. We are also seeing that the exports have not dropped as badly as we expected them to. And we hope that in the following year, we will be able to at least have our growth in positive numbers. But having said all of that, let me say that, we still need to take all the precautions, because as we see that it goes away, then it comes back. It has not in the first place gone away completely. So people have to take all the precautions. We are open practically. The whole country has been opened up. But still, those individual precautions need to be taken for the sake of one's own self and for the sake of those around us and our communities.
So you mentioned the country has reopened. So the lockdown has been eased right now, and has there? Do you see any changes in terms of the number of cases that are coming as a result, as people start to move and get closer into contact? The experience, at least in our country, but also we see in Europe and other places, is that then the curve is starting to move in the wrong direction. For now, how is the situation as of today, and do you still have travel restrictions, and what are the restrictions with regard internally, but especially also externally to Pakistan?
Well, externally, the flights have been opened. All international flights can now fly in. We had put a number of restrictions, the test-related restrictions, on arrival restrictions, all of that have been taken away. Internally also, we have opened up. In fact, Pakistan was also quite, I would say, early in terms of going in for a kind of a calibrated relaxation in the lockdown. So we opened up some sectors which we thought were less vulnerable to COVID infections. And then we also moved to opening up the construction sector. Agriculture was not impacted as badly as some of the service sectors were. And also on account of Ramadan and some of the other festivities that we had. So people were traveling a lot as well. So it did not result in the kind of spike, as I was saying, that we were expecting. So even today, and so we have also, I think, used this smart lockdown strategy where we identified the hotspots within cities, and then we completely quarantined those hotspots. And that strategy, which has been actually duly acknowledged by the World Health Organization, and you probably saw some of these reports, including the comment that Bill Gates made the other day in terms of describing Pakistan as a COVID success story. I would say that luckily, we have not seen the kind of spike that other countries have seen in terms of the aftermath of opening up. So I really hope, I don't know what factors played into that. For that, perhaps more research is still needed, but our numbers are continuously going down despite the relaxation of the lockdown that we have seen over the last several weeks.
Well, that's great news, and it shows that we can all learn from each other. And I'm glad to see that a strategy of locking down in place in particular areas quickly, if you have the testing and the tracing capacity, really can have a benefit. So congratulations to you and your country. This is, as you said, something we all are dealing with and we're all learning from. Let me switch over to, you mentioned that exports had not been affected as much as you had feared, and then frankly hadn't been affected as much as was originally feared. The United States has been one of the largest sources of foreign direct investment in Pakistan, as well as a large export market for Pakistan. Talk a little bit, if you could, about the sectors that have most benefited from this cooperation, and particularly if there are sectors that are relevant to the American Midwest on the trading side and the investment side.
Well, yes, Ambassador, you and I come from a generation of diplomats that I am still dealing with this relationship directly. But those who worked on Pakistan-US business and investment relationship would describe this relationship in terms of being the largest, both in terms of trade and investment. And that's what we would like it to be. I would say that over the last several years, there are other countries also who have come in as major investors into Pakistan, that particularly include the Gulf Arab states, and also China having made those investments. But if we were to look at the presence of some of the companies over the years, United States indeed has been and continues to be a very, very important investor. And those investments, have been in the beverage sector, in the energy sector, in the pharma sector, and there we have clearly seen more interest. Like, for instance, over the last 2-3 years, we have once again seen a renewal of interest in Pakistan's agriculture sector. So Kargil has gone back, which had actually come out of Pakistan some years ago. Similarly, ExxonMobil had also come out. They have also gone back. And they have actually made significant investment. And there are other energy companies also that are looking at possibilities. In terms of the sectors that can be of potential interest for companies operating out of Midwest, I can say, for instance, soya bean. In 2017 and 18, we imported close to $1 billion, about $800 to $900 million of soya bean from United States. And then Midwest is and can be a major beneficiary of agriculture related. Similarly, farm equipment also. You know, if I look at the existing trade portfolio for year 2018, it comes to around $1 billion for the Midwestern states, the total volume of import and export from United States and Pakistan. And frankly, this is way less than what the potential is. You know, I mean, the Prime Minister and President have had 3 summit meetings. And in every single interaction, they both recognized the immense potential in bilateral trade and investment. Export-wise, yes, US is a very important destination. US is one of the largest single country destination for our exports, you know, and then most of them are textile based. So we would like to create possibilities. And I think looking at Pakistan, where we are sandwiched between 2 of the fastest growing economies in the world, which includes India and China. And the country which is the outlet for a number of landlocked countries in Central Asia, which is also a bridge between 2 of the major energy centers in the world, both in Central Asia and the Gulf. You know, and with a huge population, expanding middle class, domestic captive market, and a growth rates that were pretty impressive. You know, Pakistan can and must have a very close relationship with companies based with the US companies, including those. I think agriculture capacity building support, value addition, because we are and we will remain, you know, a major consumer of many of those products, you know, and that's not going to change. We are also a net exporter of food products to the Middle East, and that's where, you know, we can partner with. IT is another area where Pakistan has a huge potential. We are already providing the backroom services and facilities to the companies in various parts of the United States, including Chicago. So that's another area where I believe there. And similarly, I mean, you have Boeing. And, you know, I mean, Pakistan's airline industry, PIA in particular, needs a lot of fresh injection of fleet and also spares and so on and so forth. That's a major export from the Midwest, and that's an area where we need a lot of input also. So I see a lot of potential there as well.
Well, that's great. I appreciate it. I think the opportunity clearly is there, and we can hopefully build on that. And you know, one day when we get more travel, Boeing can sell more airplanes, as you mentioned. So that's that's important. Let me switch to foreign policy, if I can, Ambassador, and talk a little bit about your region. Developments in Afghanistan are on the one hand positive with movement on the peace process. On the other hand, it remains a place with extraordinary violence continuing to beset that part of the world. Kashmir, major issues there, of course, with the changing policy that your neighbor India has pursued in the last year or so. What is your government's outlook for peace and security in your own region?
I think that's a very important question. and and that's a challenge that we are trying to deal with. And I must say that on the Western Front, we at least see some good results in terms of what we have done in terms of contributing to the peace process in Afghanistan. We have supported the process seriously and sincerely in whatever way we could, because I think after Afghanistan, Pakistan is actually the worst sufferer of the continued instability and the historic conflict and strife that we have seen in that country. And we are happy to see that first, the US and Taliban were able to get to that peace agreement, which resulted from a set of intense negotiations, with both sides spending hundreds of hours. And that, I think, and not just the signing of the agreement, but also the commitment that both sides have shown in terms of moving forward and in implementing the commitments that they made in the process. And we are also glad to see that the National Unity Government and the government in Afghanistan has also, and the Lojarga has also announced their intention to complete the release of the prisoner release process. Because I think the sooner, because frankly, the intra-Afghan peace is going to be much more complicated than the US-Taliban peace. And therefore, it is very important that, the process starts as quickly, because it is the Afghans who will have to live with that agreement. And therefore, I think it is important. We are happy that we are seeing signs of that process starting soon. And I am hopeful that it will start soon. And once parties sit across, it is for the Afghans to decide what kind of agreement that they would like to have to pave the way for a comprehensive ceasefire and an arrangement that they can live with. Pakistan has and will continue to play a constructive role, and we believe that others also in the region should contribute to this, because this is clearly a shared responsibility. And before I switch to the eastern side, I think one very important point, and that brings me back to COVID and its impact, because all our countries are trying to deal with the challenges posed by COVID, rich and poor, big and small. In Afghanistan, long-term sustainable peace cannot be realized until we are able to help Afghanistan transition from a war-centered economy to a normal economy. And then that's where, all the Afghan stakeholders will have an interest and stake in that. That's where every other country around Afghanistan has, I think, a responsibility and interest in contributing. And Pakistan being a country through which Afghanistan is linked to the outside world, will have even a bigger role to play. And we are determined to contribute whatever way we can, and that's where I believe that US and Pakistan can even contribute more. And a stronger bilateral economic and trade partnership will also help the peace process by helping Afghanistan transition to a normal economy also. Now, on the Eastern Front, unfortunately, despite all the peace gestures, really, it's been a year since India did the BJP government under Prime Minister Modi revoked Article 37, revoked Article 35A. And frankly, we met, and I wish you have a recording of our conversation that we had when I met you last year, to go back and see how true it was in terms of the fears, concerns, and apprehensions that I had shared with you on account of how we saw Indian actions. I mean, we were saying that their actions in Kashmir are partly driven by the BJP's Hindutva agenda, and it is also an attempt to take that one state out of the Indian Union that has a Muslim majority. So there is a certain, communal angle to that also. We were saying that this is being done to shift the demographics of Kashmir. Clearly, in this year, they have brought in about 400, half a million Indian citizens and they have moved them to Kashmir. We were saying, and the idea is to change the demography of the state. Then we were saying that, the Pulwama incident and those claims regarding the existence of terrorist camps were all unfounded, and that all of that was done to divert attention, to gain political mileage. And all of that, in hindsight, has turned out to be true. So that's where Prime Minister had said then, and I can say today, we are committed to dialogue, because there is no other way out except the two parties sitting across and seek to resolve the Kashmir dispute and all other issues between our two countries. And for that engagement and dialogue to happen, India will have to create the enabling environment, undo the actions that they have taken. Unless and until that is done, frankly, we will not be able to see long-term sustainable peace in South Asia. And frankly, the road to peace in South Asia basically goes through Kashmir. Both our countries have, I would say, an obligation and responsibility for the sake of our people. Because Prime Minister said, just around the time that he took over, he said that, instead of fighting each other, our two countries should be fighting poverty. And if India were to take one step, I will take two. So that commitment is still there. And, you spoke about tourism. And you spoke about engagement. Despite all that has been happening between our two countries, Pakistan still went ahead and opened up the Kartarpur corridor, which even after COVID, one of the first acts to open up the border were to open up, at least to offer to Indian government that we are ready to open the Kartarpur corridor, which is the religious place for Sikh religion. It is one of the most revered shrines in Sikh religion. That's again, I think, a clear sign and indication of Pakistan's commitment to engage and our commitment to seek resolution of issues through dialogue.
Well, they're tough issues, both on your western side and on your eastern side. More hope on the Afghan process, as you said, than there is right now with the relationship with India. Complicating perhaps all of that is the relationship that Pakistan has with China. And if you can talk a little bit about that relationship, both in its bilateral sense and how it affects particularly what's happening to your west, but also perhaps in Afghanistan, and especially as tensions grow between the United States and China. as we have seen over the past few months or more, how that affects both your bilateral relationship with Beijing and, frankly, your bilateral relationship here with Washington. How does that growing tension affect your ability to maintain positive, good relationships with both sides, which is something you've valued and have been part of for a long time?
Well, I think that's first of all, both China and U.S. Have been Pakistan's close friends for decades. And so far, we have been able to maintain very good relationship with both China and United States. In fact, you would know this. Pakistan was the bridge, and Pakistan was the country that helped US and China have those conversations, the initial conversations, that famous Henry Kissinger trip to Beijing. So for us, it's still, both these relationships are important, and obviously, therefore, when the tensions go up between US and China, it makes things difficult for countries like Pakistan it's always difficult to choose between friends. And therefore, we hope that the tensions that we are seeing are temporary, because these are two most important countries in the world. They are not just the engines of growth, but they are also the providers of stability as well. And a stable US-China relationship is not just good for Pakistan and the region, but for the world on the whole. And with what we are seeing in terms of the challenges posed by COVID, the economic challenges, the need to come together to find common solutions. I think the imperative of major countries, including United States and China, has never been more compelling than it is today, frankly. So for us, I say this, and I think the almost 2 years that I have been ambassador here, one of the important, consistent messages that I have conveyed here is the importance that we attach to our relationship with the United States, and the fact that Prime Minister and President have actually met 3 times. That's also a record. And we don't want our relationship to be seen through the prism of any other country, be it Kabul, be it Delhi, or be it Beijing, I mean, it's not for us to play a role, but of course, we will do whatever we can to at least in the context of our region, because clearly, for instance, Afghanistan is an area where both US and China have a commonality of interest in working together to achieve peace. And similarly, I'm sure in terms of peace in South Asia, President Trump himself has offered to mediate, not once, not twice, but several times. Although India has not accepted that, but then US has also, and you would know that very well, historically played a role in diffusing tension in the region. And that's another, I think, commonality that would be shared by United States and China. So for us, it is, if the escalation goes up, it will be a tough choice. And I hope countries don't have to, because I think those who believe that we are going back to the old Cold War paradigm, I think that may not be the case, because the world is far more integrated. The trade relationships are far more extensive, and it's much more difficult to exist in silos, and therefore countries will have to have relationships with all the countries, and we will and we have maintained these relationships, and we would want to continue to maintain the balance.
I'm reminded by something the Singaporean Prime Minister said a few years ago. He said, if you force us to choose between China and the United States, you may not like the answer. So forcing to choose is probably under those circumstances are difficult. Let me go to a question that I got through the wonders of the internet here. Directly to it that is relevant, and it is about China and the Belt and Road Initiative. The question is, the price of being a leading partner in the Belt and Road Initiative is often indebtedness to China. And Sri Lanka, of course, in your neighborhood, has learned the hard way what the price of indebtedness is, with China taking control of its port. Is Pakistan concerned about being too dependent upon China as a critical link in the BRI?
I was ambassador in Tokyo before coming here. So this was a question often raised there also. And perhaps around that time, we didn't have as much clarity as we have today. And it's not just our clarity. I think Pakistan has been very transparent, because we have gone into the IMF program. We have had economic support and assistance transactions with the World Bank, with the Asian Development Bank, and with some of the other bilateral donors also. And we also went back to seek the rescheduling of the debt payment through the G20 as well. And all of those conversations would not be complete without Pakistan bringing complete transparency to what it owes to who. And then I can tell you this, and I'm on record, that China is still not our largest bilateral creditor. And most of what we owe to them is still not even due. So, these fears that we often hear, I think are exaggerated. Pakistan is a huge economy. We have never, in 74 years of our existence, defaulted even once. We have been going back and forth to IMF, let me confess that. But our debt to GDP ratio is still not, it's still comparable, if not better, to most countries at the same level of development as we are. And we have never defaulted, and we have no intention of doing that. And the debt that we owe to China and everyone else is a debt that we are determined to pay back. And we have the capacity to do that. And we are also ready and determined to undertake those reforms, because, this Prime Minister, when he came, he said it very clearly that he doesn't like to go to these international financial institutions. And if possible, we would want this time to be the last time for us to go to international financial institutions. And for that, we are ready to basically undertake those very tough, difficult, stringent reforms domestically. And that's why when I said in the opening that for us, unfortunately, COVID came at the wrong time. Because he took a lot of flack, in terms of taking those tough, difficult measures. And those measures had started to produce results. And when we were struck by the COVID. So what I'm saying is that China or no China, our debt is something that we take seriously, and we are trying to turn around the economy to make sure that we return what we owe to everyone.
We only have a few minutes left, and so here's my last question, which actually comes from someone, and I think it's a good question to end on. The question is, many Americans have been suspicious of Pakistan in dealing with the United States, especially when it comes to Afghanistan. I assume the questioner asked that there are also suspicions from the Pakistani public about U.S. intentions in the region. And so the question is, how can we address these suspicions and strengthen our two countries' relations going forward? Not only with regard to Afghanistan, but of course that is a central point, and it has been now for almost 20 years. How do you see us moving forward in a productive way?
First of all, I think we need to talk more. It is through engagement, being honest and transparent with each other. I've been working on this relationship now almost without break for the past 12, 13 years. And I think, and looking at the historic trajectory of the relationship, whenever our two countries have worked together, we have achieved a lot of good results. Unfortunately, there have been hiccups also. And that happens when, of course, US has interest. You know, I always say that US has a huge footprint and a very short memory. And you basically, as the preeminent power, you know, US is driven by its own interests. And then sometimes in that process, you know, it loses sight of the concerns, the fears and interests of the partner countries also. And that's where we need to talk to each other honestly in terms of what our fears and expectations are and what your fears and expectations are. And to not shift the goalposts. I think, you know, I mean, look at Afghanistan. I mean, we, and the areas that were, you know, we have integrated all of the tribal belt into Pakistan. We have cleansed all our territories of any proscribed entities and terrorist groups, you know. We have contributed completely, sincerely to the peace process. But our relationship should not be and is not all about counterterrorism. I think there are lots of other interests, and it's a factor of peace and stability in the wider region also. And that's where we need to continue to talk to each other. And US, once you move on, get out, you know, you lose your interest also. I think that's what needs to be avoided.
Ambassador Khan, I think I couldn't agree with you more. More dialogue is always good, and you are right that Americans' ability to maintain their intention tends to be short-lived. When problems are resolved or no longer looked at, we walk away. But one of the reasons we have strong diplomatic relations with many countries is to give the opportunity to maintain that dialogue in Washington, where you are, of course, in Chicago, where we want to welcome you as soon as possible with the changing circumstances that we're living in. But in the meantime, I want to thank you for joining us here today. I really appreciate the conversation. As usual, your frankness was wonderful, appreciated, and enlightening. And I look forward to seeing you very soon, either in Washington or in Chicago, for a next one of our conversations. Thank you so much for being with us.
Thank you so much. Lovely to be with you. And I thank your viewers also for this very interesting exchange and for their questions.
Terrific. All the best. Bye-bye.